Story 1. Okay, a bit to start with. I'm a freelance hiking and snowmobile guide on the island of Svalbard, Norwegian Arctic, and have to deal with all sorts of people on a day-to-day basis. I'm not super sure if this guy still qualifies as an entitled dad, since his son must have been at least 40, but here we go. A few months ago, I was guiding a trip by myself. We only sent one guide out when the group was small, so I went to the hotels to pick up my guests, an Italian couple and this Saudi Arabian father and son combo. I walked into their hotel, introduced myself, and got everybody to sit in the car. When the entitled father opened the passenger seat door, sat down and looked at me confused. Entitled father: "Oh, sorry, this is your seat, right?" Me: "No, you can sit there if you want. It's easier to drive from the other side anyway." I always try to crack a joke or two, to break the ice. Lots of people are nervous when having to drive a snowmobile the first time. He looked at me slightly more confused, but I assumed it's only a language thing. Brought them back to HQ and gave them a full safety briefing and overview on a map on where we'd be going. After that, I got them dressed and told them to wait outside, because our suits are made to keep you warm at -30, so inside a building you quickly start to melt. Once I was dressed, I went to meet them outside. Entitled father: "Oh, you're coming with us on the tour?" Me: "I hope so, since I'm your guide." I had told them in the briefing the usual, "Hey, my name is Kat, and I'll be your guide for today." "Is that a gun?" "Yes, sir. But don't worry, she's not yet loaded." Entitled father and his son looked at each other confused, and we all started walking towards the snowmobiles so I could give them a small briefing on how to drive them. The Italians had told me they have been driving before, so I decided to place them in the end of the group and the entitled father and his son in the front. Everybody got to drive their own vehicle because, out of experience, it's always better for the more experienced guests to be in the back, since they might have to speed up here and there to fill a gap. Entitled father: "But where is the guide?" Me: "Here, I'm just in front of you." A proud 1.77 meters, had to miss. "But you're female." "Guides can't be female." HM: "About 50% of our guides are girls here on Svalbard. It's not that uncommon." "Don't worry, we girls are just as good as our male colleagues." His son: "I think my father wants to know who will operate the gun." "Well, let's hope we don't even have to take it out of the boot. But if we have, I am trained and licensed to shoot." "No." "No? You are a woman. Women can't shoot guns. It's not safe." Me: "Excuse me? Guys, if you don't want me as your guide, that's fine with me. Go back into HQ, take the suit off, and tell our receptionist to call you a taxi. If you don't feel safe, that's up to you. But I am the guide for this trip today, and if you want to head out, you'll have to deal with me. But if we don't go, we want our money back. You can try, but I bet you that you won't get a penny because it's your own decision to not come along. I will go if you get a male guide for us. I won't get anybody else to join. You've signed the agreement that I'm in charge of this tour, and you will listen to what I tell you to do and not to do." "I didn't sign anything." "Yes, about 15 minutes ago, before you got dressed. I saw you sign it." The entitled father then walks off back into HQ. His son and the Italians stay. His son called his dad and found out that he would not come with a woman. His son and the Italians drove with me. We saw reindeer, sea ice, a polar bear in the distance, no need for the rifle, and in general had a great time. After the tour, his son came to me to apologize for his behavior and called me a good girl guide. My boss heard that and still mocks me with it today. Story 2. It was a quiet day at the military camp. I, Private Smith, was standing at the gate with my partner, Private Johnson, our rifles at the ready. We were both starting to get a little bored. It had been a long shift and not much had happened. But that all changed when a car approached the gate at high speed. Private Johnson and I exchanged a glance. We both knew that this wasn't going to be a routine visit. The car came to a halt in front of the gate and a woman stepped out. She was angry, her face contorted with rage. "I demand to see the commander," she spat out. Private Johnson and I tried to calm her down, explaining that she couldn't just barge into the camp like that. We asked her to leave her car and follow us to the visitors' center, but she wasn't having any of it. She revved up her engine and tried to force her way through the gate. Private Johnson and I had to act fast. We grabbed her by the arm and pulled her out of the car. She struggled and shouted, demanding to see the commander. "Ma'am, please calm down," I said. "We can't just let you barge into the camp and cause a scene. Let's go to the visitors' center and call the commander to come and speak with you." She grudgingly followed us to the visitors' center, where we called the commander to come and speak with her. When he arrived, she launched into a tirade, telling him all about the military individual who had refused to let her cut in line at the store. The commander listened patiently before finally speaking. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but the military has more important things to worry about than to reprimand someone that didn't allow you to cut in line at a store. I must ask you to leave the camp immediately." Karen's face turned red with anger at the commander's words. "How dare you talk to me like that?" she shouted. "I'm entitled to have my complaint heard." The commander remained calm, but firm. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but your behavior is unacceptable. I must ask you to leave the camp immediately." But Karen wasn't about to give up. She lunged at the colonel, trying to slap him. Private Johnson and I quickly moved in to intervene, tackling Karen to the ground and handcuffing her. She struggled and shouted, but we were able to subdue her. "Take her away," the commander said grimly. "She's not welcome here." Private Johnson and I escorted Karen off the camp, shaking our heads at the bizarre turn of events. "Well, that was a wild ride," Private Johnson said to me. "Tell me about it," I replied. "I'm just glad it's over." After being taken down and handcuffed by Private Johnson and me, Karen was arrested and faced criminal charges for attempting to break into the military camp and attempting to attack the commander. The judge who presided over her case was unsympathetic to Karen's entitled attitude and her belief that the world owed her something. He sentenced her to 6 months in prison for her actions. Karen was shocked and outraged by the sentence. She had never been in trouble with the law before and couldn't believe that she was being punished for trying to assert her rights. But the judge was firm. He told Karen that her behavior was unacceptable and that she needed to learn to respect the rules and boundaries of society. Karen spent 6 long months in prison, reflecting on her actions and the consequences of her entitlement. Story 3. I work as a soccer referee in Australia for junior games, and I have worked as a soccer referee for several years. I am 16, but am small and look younger. A few weeks ago, I was allotted to referee a soccer game for under 12. I arrived 40 minutes before the game was about to start, and was preparing with my 2 assistant referees. Normally for under 12 games, there are no official assistant referees, but I lucked out. Around 15 minutes before the start of the game, we go out to check the uniforms and equipment of all the players, which is very standard practice and is required to be completed before the start of each game, and the coaches of the teams are well aware of this. The home team was fine. We spoke to the players, and within 30 seconds we were walking over to the away team. We walked up to the coach, standing in his line of sight, when he had all the players huddled around him, and waited for him to finish speaking to them so we could check their uniforms. He finished talking and sent the kids out to warm up before we could get a word in, which was mildly annoying as the whole process would take a bit longer. "Coach, could you call the kids in so we can have a word, thanks?" I asked the coach. We are trained to not give in an inch of ground when dealing with parents, players, or coaches, so that is why I may sound a little rude. The coaches know the referees have full authority, but sometimes they need to be reminded. "Can't you just wait a few minutes? I want the kids to finish their warm-up." "No, we are going to speak to the kids now. Once we make a decision, we must stick with it, even if it doesn't happen on the field. Just wait 5 minutes or so to talk to the girls. It won't take long." My first assistant started to speak, but I cut him off. We talk to the players when I say we talk to the players, and I say we talk to the players now. It's just a few minutes. Referee, it's not that important, just wait. Right. We are going to come out in 12 minutes to talk to the players. I motion for my assistants to follow, and we walk back into the referee's room. 12 minutes was the amount of time that the game was scheduled to start. As a referee, I have the authority to shorten each half of the match in junior games. But in this league, it was strongly discouraged by the coaches and parents. As for a child to sign up to this specific league, it cost around $2,000 Australian dollars. 12 minutes later, we walked back out onto the field, with the captains already waiting at the center of the field. Unusual. The coach yelled out for me to start the match across the field, as we were a few minutes late. I slowly made my way over to him. Call the players so we can speak to them. Also, because we are starting this game late, the halves will be cut to make up for the lost time. I told him. You can't do that in this league, don't you know? Just start the game, referee. I can do that in this league, and we have specific instructions from the leaders of our branch. Not important that we were allowed to cut halves, but try to avoid doing so. I can and will do that, so I suggest you call your players in before you lose any more time. I told him again. That's nonsense. I'm going to report you to the football committee. Coaches are not allowed to swear. Doing so is the immediate reason for expulsion from the game, and he had also openly disagreed with my decision. By this point, a small crowd had formed, with parents and officials from both teams alike. In this league, we were also allowed to give cards to coaches, and they worked the same way as on the pitch. I showed the coach a red card, meaning he had to leave the premises of the grounds, and the club had to pay a $500 odd, about $400 est fine. As I was walking away from him, he yelled out that he didn't mean it, and that we can talk to the players now. I went to my marshal and told him to escort the coach away from the game, which he did. In the end, I didn't bother cutting the halves of the game, as no one but the coach and my assistants had heard that I would cut the halves. The time lost was about 20 minutes, and there was a 30-minute break between the end of this game and my next one. The game started and finished without a hitch. Story 4. I figured everyone would enjoy hearing more stories about my crazy mother. I was traveling down memory lane and remembered this gem from the time I was pregnant with my kid. It's not the worst thing she has done, but it ranks up there with bad things to do to your kids. I was around 5 months along by this point and already had the gender of the baby. We weren't into those fancy gender reveal parties. I texted everyone we knew the gender right after leaving that appointment. We went to the baby's daddy friend's mother's home for a visit. We'll call her Patty. She was very excited for us and begged us to let her be our child's fairy godmother because she was into that whole fantasy and witch-type culture. I didn't see anything wrong with it, even if the baby's daddy was a little put off, but we agreed. Patty was very happy, and it felt nice to have a supportive person in my life that wasn't trying to control every little thing. Patty then offers to throw a baby shower for us. She admitted that she couldn't buy us extravagant gifts, but that she knew friends who had baby items they no longer needed, and that she would ask if we could have them. I didn't mind hand-me-downs. A lot of my kids' clothing was from the thrift store or Salvation Army for a long time. I was thrilled about the gifts. As long as they weren't broken, I happily accepted them. I got to work right away, making invitations in Photoshop, printed them out and hand-wrote everyone's name that I wanted to invite. I even ordered special envelopes with mine, the baby's daddy, and the name we had picked out for our baby printed on them. I sent them out, made a Facebook post. I even said that gifts weren't a requirement. I just wanted to celebrate having a baby with my family. Patty had requested a few invitations to give out to her friends with the hand-me-downs, which I willingly gave. I was looking forward to the big day. I did ask everyone who wanted to come to please respond by a certain date, just so me and Patty could make sure to have enough food for everyone to eat. By the time the date arrived, no one in my family had responded back. Only Patty and her friends, plus the baby's daddy's friends, along with 2 friends of mine from my old job. I called my uncle and asked if he had gotten the invitation. He said that he didn't want to come because I was being cruel to my mom. I immediately called her. Here is how the conversation went. What? Hey, aren't you coming to the baby shower? Why would I bother stepping foot into that garbage place? For me? Because I'm having your grandbaby. Aren't you happy for me? Why would I be happy for you? You took my baby shower away from me. Why would I care what you do? Your baby shower? It's not about you. It's about me and the baby I'm having. I'm sure the baby's daddy likes to tell you that. I'm sure that ugly witch Patty is going to throw you a great party, but don't expect me or anyone in this family to be there. I hung up on her after that. The day of the baby shower, I was miserable but tried to appear happy for the guests that did come. The baby's daddy and I got a lot of gifts, most of them second-hand, but we were happy regardless. We also got some money to help with a few expenses for when the baby is born. When the baby's daddy and I got back to his home that night and unloaded the car, I saw a text from Mom. She asked if I had been given any money. I immediately called her and asked her why she wanted to know. Because you have to pay rent. I wasn't living with Mom at this point and couldn't believe the audacity that she would be demanding rent when I didn't even live with her. No, Mom, I don't have to pay rent. I moved out 6 months ago. If you want rent money, hit up your other kids that do live with you. I'm sure Dave, brother, doesn't mind giving up smoking weed for the month, and maybe Kate, sister, wouldn't mind cutting back on buying that latest Michael Kors bag. Mom shouted at me about how those two couldn't be bothered to help and that I was the only one who would. And why don't you have any money? I went to the casino. Are you going to give me the money for not? And it comes out. She only wanted more money to blow at the casino. I hate casinos. I hate scratch-offs and the lottery. It's a money pit. After I took a deep breath, I told her, No, Mom. I will not be giving you any money to feed your addiction. If you had needed money for bills, you wouldn't have taken that money and lost it at the casino. Maybe if you live without hot water and electricity for the month, your other kids will want to chip in and you'll learn a lesson about being more careful with your finances. I hung up while she was mid-screaming. It felt good to get that over her. She ended up driving over to my place and banged on the door until we threatened to call the police. She ended up leaving and didn't talk to me until my kid was born. Story 5. My dad owns a house that he has been renting out for some time. The tenants who live there were, for the most part, decent people whom my dad thought were trustworthy. That all changed about 2 months into the tenancy when the tenant refused to pay the month's rent. My dad showed some leniency and gave them another month to pay what was owed, but they didn't pay anything. By this point, my dad, frustrated by the whole situation and being 2 months out of rent money, offered them a deal. He proposed that they leave the house as soon as possible and pay only half the money owed. They countered with a different agreement. They would leave the house in a clean state with all of their furniture left behind as compensation. My dad, wanting to be done with them, agreed. When my dad arrived at the house, he found the place in a mess, with none of the furniture left behind, including the furniture that belonged to my dad in the first place. The 2 sofas that my dad owned were left behind, but they were trashed and left in the shed. When my dad confronted them, asking them to pay the full amount that the furniture was worth, he was met with a promise of payment after 2 weeks, which he didn't believe. When he requested they pay earlier, he was met with, "Good luck getting your money," followed by laughing emojis. This made my dad angry, and he decided that he wasn't going to let this slide. My dad knew that the tenant was a Christian pastor of a church, and his son also had some job related to the church. My dad contacted the church and explained everything, from how they hadn't paid him rent money to stealing the furniture and trashing the place. The church was somewhat interested in this behavior. The next day, my dad received an angry phone call from the tenant's son, cursing at him and asking him what he thought he was doing contacting the church, saying he was being unfair. My dad hung up on him, only for him to attempt to ring 10 times after he hung up. From what we could piece together, the The church had told the pastor that if he didn't settle things with my dad, he and his son would lose their jobs. My dad received the full amount for the furniture that same day and agreed to back off. My dad later said it was never about the money, but the way this guy treated him and his values. My dad, being a Christian himself, was disappointed. Story 6. The subject of this story is my mother. For the sake of this story, I'll call her Amber. She's in her late 70s and works for a women's clothing store which caters specifically to older clientele. She's been working for this particular company for some 20 years now. The manager of the store is the absolute epitome of a Karen. So let's call her Karen. Extremely entitled, short-haired, chubby, and a blatant backstabber. Because the store is staffed by mostly older women, cliques tend to form. It's basically high school. Yes, older women can be that petty, and naturally Karen has her own cronies. During periods where no one is in the store, there also tends to be a ton of gossip, important for later. The assistant manager, let's call her Jackie, is also one of Karen's lackeys. If Karen does something, then Jackie isn't far behind, etc. Amber is a bit of a ball buster, and she has zero tolerance for garbage in her personal life. Over the years, she has tried to stay impartial when it comes to her work, however, because to her it's all about professionalism. It also helps that she has been the top seller for her district for some 10 years running despite working part-time. Karen and Jackie absolutely hate her for it. So much so that Karen routinely schedules her for hours which are not especially good. Despite this though, Amber still has her loyal clientele, and she always comes out on top against the other sales associates in total sales every quarter. As expected, this naturally feeds the horrible feedback loop with Karen and Jackie. When COVID hit, the company decided to cut all commission for sales associates. The commission was one of the main reasons why Amber endured Karen and Jackie's nonsense. While she only made slightly above the state's minimum wage, with the commission, she could double or even triple that amount on good days. According to her, no other retailer in the area offers this kind of system, and it's pretty unlikely that the company will reinstate it even after COVID ends. Along with the cut in wages, the store was also forced to decrease the amount of hours that they could offer to their associates. Karen took this as a way to essentially bar Amber from working at the store. While other associates were getting 8-10 hours a week, Amber would see maybe 6 if she was lucky, and they would be during times of low customer traffic. Karen could get away with this because the district manager is also in her pocket. Along with the reduced hours and the removal of commissions, the store naturally had a mandatory mask policy for all employees and customers. Karen and her lackeys would often whine and complain about how unnecessary this was because according to them, COVID is a hoax, and wearing masks makes you subservient to the government. There were a few incidents where Karen would let people without masks into the store despite the state and company mandates. Amber refused to rock the boat, however, so when this would happen, she would go into the back of the store and stay as far away from these people as possible. During this period in time, a friend of the family and good friend of Amber's passed away due to complications from COVID. The funeral was set for a time when Amber was scheduled to work, so she called out that day. Karen and Jackie attacked Amber, and the deceased claiming that she must have caught the flu or been in bad health, and that Amber was feeding into the lie, "Oh, how nice it must be to live such a privileged life." Not long after, a few of the store's loyal clients also passed away from COVID, and still Karen and Jackie, along with their groupies, maintained their narrative in the most vindictive way possible. Every time someone died, it must have been because of bad life choices or bad health. Never was it attributed to the global pandemic that was claiming thousands of people a day, according to Karen and her groupies. And always when Amber decided to go to the services, she would hear snide remarks regarding how she was supporting a hoax. I guess sympathy is not really a thing for these people. Some of these customers were regulars who had been coming to that particular store for years, and still none of the groupies would relent on these points. Recently, the COVID restrictions have started to lift, and many of the clientele and employees have gotten their vaccines. This includes submitting paperwork to show that you have indeed obtained a vaccine or a note from a doctor explaining why you couldn't have one. Not Karen nor Jackie, though. To them, getting the vaccine would be like pumping poison into their veins. Instead, they decided to use fake COVID white cards with their information, effectively forging the documents. Amber, however, has suggested multiple times that they just get the vaccines because it is something that is mandated by the company. All employees must get vaccines when they are available, and given that almost all of the employees are above the age of 60, they have been eligible for the shots for months now. Recently, Amber had an emotional conversation directly with Karen where she expressed her concern for her. "I just want you and your family to be safe, so please get the vaccine." Karen responded with her normal snide attitude, of course. A few days later, however, Karen sent a text message mentioning that she had finally got the vaccine. She didn't. Amber replied that it was great and that she was happy for her. Karen just replied with a gif of some guy cursing. This was the beginning of the end for Amber. The incident. During one of her shifts, Amber overheard Karen and Jackie discussing how Amber was a witch and a sheep who bought the story about how Karen had taken the vaccine. During that same shift, Amber was working with a customer in the back, and some woman came into the store and stole a couple items of clothing, probably totaling out to be $100 at most. Now it's company policy that during all shifts, there always be at least 2 employees in the store, and during this particular stretch of time, Jackie was the only other person in the store. According to the video cameras, Jackie was up in the front of the store playing with her phone when this woman came in. Normally, if someone steals items from the store, the protocol is to avoid confronting them and instead just call security after they've left the store. This is mainly to avoid lawsuits and to protect the employees should these people choose to get violent. It has happened in the past. That evening, Amber received a call from Karen telling her that she was on probation pending an investigation for allowing this woman to steal from the store. Given the company's policy regarding theft, this really made no sense. It was at this point that Amber truly decided she had had enough. Eventually, this probation led to Amber's dismissal, and the official reasoning was fairly vague. The revenge. One thing that I forgot to mention, a few years ago, Amber asked me to teach her how to record things on her phone, and luckily we live in a single consent state. As such, Amber had recordings of these women backstabbing her and gossiping about rather scandalous things dating back for years. She had gathered quite the collection because you never know when you need to cover yourself. Over the years, Amber has gone to HR to no real avail, even with her recordings. Whether it be because they are also in the pocket of Karen or that they just don't care remains to be seen. The HR department works directly under the district manager. Amber is also very good at keeping any paperwork and proof of these visits, including some recordings. She also recorded the call where she was fired. Amber has a ton of very loyal clients who were pretty distraught when they learned of her dismissal. One client in particular runs a column at one of the major newspapers for the nearby city. We will call her Casey. Since Amber was a part-time worker, she didn't really have much of a leg to stand on legally when it came to claiming a wrongful dismissal claim by legal means. However, that didn't mean that she didn't have any kind of recourse. She decided to attack the problem from multiple fronts. Amber compiled some of the greatest hits from her recording collection and had me email them off to the corporate offices of the company. Specifically, the CEO, CTO, and basically every member of the board of directors. I fired a couple bursts off to anyone who had any power that I could find. Along with those recordings, she wrote an email about how Karen, Jackie, and their group of sheep all refused to get vaccines and had falsified their vaccine documents to pass the company standards. Casey then put Amber in touch with a columnist for the newspaper, and they got copies of the recordings, the text messages, and the dismissal phone call. They also did an interview which was for an article and a TV slot on the local news. Amber discussed the commission cuts, clear favoritism, lack of any intervention by HR, forged documents, company policy, the incident, etc., basically anything relevant to paint these women in a terrible light. Among some of these recordings were bits of gossip that included conversations regarding Karen's various boyfriends over the years. She was married, and Amber also wrote an anonymous email to the husband that included some of these recordings. The fallout. Everything hit the fan pretty fast, as you can probably imagine. Karen, Jackie, the district manager, and a couple of the groupies were immediately fired and put under investigation for forging documents. While forging a vaccine card isn't really something too serious, it could lead to some pretty hefty fines. There is no specific law against forging the vaccine white card. However, because the white cards contain the government seal, well, you can just imagine how illegal that might be. Let's just say the FBI has stepped in on this one. One of the recordings featured Karen admitting to using forged cards. After the article and TV slot ran on the local news, the CEO reached out to Amber to formally apologize for the behavior of HR, the district manager, Karen, and Jackie. She even went so far as to offer Amber a raise, but Amber declined because she found a job that actually paid a fair wage and let her work on her own time. The real kick of it for the CEO and the board was the fact that their employees were breaking the company policy for a store that exclusively catered to older women regarding a virus that tends to kill older people. They caught some heavy public backlash for this. Karen's husband seems to have separated from her after finding out about her infidelity. Whether or not this will lead to a divorce remains to be seen. The best part for Amber: many of her clients started coming to her new store, and again, she's doing amazing as one of the best sales associates. Thanks for reading. I know this one was a bit long. Edit. Thanks for all the support, guys. I didn't really expect this post to blow up as fast as it did. I thought I would address a couple of the concerns that people have noted in the comment section. I know parts of the story seem far-fetched, but remember, much of this has come through a second-hand account, though I did listen to the recordings and help my mom with some of the revenge. Yeah, my mom is in her 70s and she still works. She does it for a few reasons. She's on a fixed income, and the extra income helps, and she likes to be active and enjoys working with customers. My brother and I do give her extra income, but she will only take so much because she's very prideful. She's also one of the most active people I know and has a more prolific social life than I or any of my friends' family members do. No, I won't link the article because it would break the community guidelines. My mom's name is in there, and so are a few of the people involved as well as the company itself. That said, you probably could find it on Google quickly enough. The contract my mother was under is classified as at-will employment. Basically, this means that the employer or the employee can terminate the contract at any time for any reasons outside of the usual suspects: hate crimes, racial issues, etc. We did talk with a lawyer, and this particular aspect would make it difficult to fight the company and the termination since they gave such vague reasons for the firing. My mother also just didn't want to deal with a lengthy legal battle just to get back at a few idiots. The manager had it out for my mom from the beginning. I think it was due to their differing political and social views. The way I worded things must have been vague regarding the conversations and the recordings. With single consent laws, you can record a conversation if one party is aware of the recording. In this case, that party would be my mother. These women were so egotistical that they would often gossip about stuff right out on the store floor while talking with my mother as almost an aside. These recordings originally were for documenting all of the abuse that my mother endured. My mom was approached for a promotion multiple times while working for this company. She just didn't want the extra responsibility, nor did she want to work full-time. Instead, they did give her raises, but because the state was also raising their minimum wage for the past couple of years, these raises have become almost irrelevant. The FBI investigation is ongoing, and as some have mentioned, there could be jail time involved for some of these women. While that is indeed true, it's doubtful it will happen given that only Karen was recorded saying that she was using a forgery. I should also point out that I am not sure how they obtained the forgeries or whether or not they made them themselves. One thing I should also note is that my mom never really harbored any lasting ill will against Karen or Jackie, or really any of the others, until this past year. The reason was primarily because she could see that they had some kind of humanity in there. Obviously, even the Karens of the world have shades of gray, and my mom can be forgiving to a fault when it comes to people she has known for a long time. This is part of the reason why she attempted to try to reason with Karen regarding the vaccine. Though when it comes to politically charged topics, people can become very bitter. And if I had to guess, this is why Karen took all of this so far this time around.